My name is Pat Mills, and I'm the writer and narrator of Be Pure, Be Vigilant, Behave, The Secret History of 2000 AD and Judge Dredd. It covers my time creating the galaxy's greatest comic. The book covers the whole history of 2000 AD, from its origins and from the earlier comics that gave rise to it, and it takes us right through to the present day and all the other things I'm working on. One of my comic book characters, Accident Man, has just been made into a movie starring Scott Adkins, and it should be out later this year. It's the story of an assassin who murders people and makes it look like accidents. Serial Killer, by myself and Kevin O'Neill, is a text novel series. It began life as a sitcom, and we found it had so much humorous potential that we decided to turn it into a novel. And Volume 1 is out at the moment, and I'm currently working on Volume 2, which is called Goodnight John Boy. It was an interesting move going from comics to text novels like Serial Killer. It's really forced on me by just the terrible state of British comics today, where you can barely make a living at them. But text novels, by comparison, are booming, especially independent publishing. It's actually more fun, believe it or not, writing text than doing comic strips, because in the past, comic strips, if you were working with fantastic artists and fantastic publisher and so on, but today there's so many restrictions, and I really wanted to get my freedom back, and that's what I've got with Serial Killer. My favorite story, I think, has to be Charley's War, because it's such an important story that had to be told. In terms of characters I identify with, well, it'll come as no surprise to anyone that it has to be Rojaws. I wish there was a way that readers could go back to Prog 1 and read them all in order digitally. There was talk about it at Rebellion, but it seems to have faded away. I certainly haven't seen it advertised anywhere. So I'm sorry to tell you, at the moment, the answer is probably no. Environmental issues never really came into why 2000 AD was printed on such poor quality paper stock. But at the same time, a comic like 2000 AD, it probably decays very quickly, so it's probably environmentally friendly. But I think that was just by the by. And I suppose the truth is that the glossier the paper, probably the worse it is for the environment. Animal rights also came into some of the stories. The one that comes immediately to mind is a story in Crisis, drawn by John Hicklenton, where there are some saboteurs and they break into a laboratory and free some of the animals. And speaking for myself, I always like the idea that nature should always win in the end. I mean, that goes right back to the very first Flesh. So old One Eye, the hag tyrannosaur, she dies of old age. She is not defeated by humans, like as in King Kong or Godzilla or something. No, she has to win, and that's because we all know that nature ultimately wins. Everyone's familiar with some of the big names in 2000 AD, like John Wagner, Grant Morrison, Alan Moore. But there were some other guys who really made a difference to 2000 AD and really made it a success. And, let me stop with just about, say, 3 of them. Jerry Finley Day, because he wrote Rogue Trooper. Doug Church, because he laid out those early progs and he made them look sexy and powerful. And that was really down to him. And finally, Peter Harris, who came up with the very first Judge Dredd story to appear. And that really laid the foundations for the other Dredd stories that have followed. I think if I'd had more time, I would have really firmed up the idea of a 2000 AD universe. So some of the characters meet up with each other. So you have Satanus from the Flesh Saga, who comes into Judge Dredd in the Cursed Earth. And there's plenty of other examples. But it was a very loose thing. And looking back on it, I wish I'd really set that down in stone so that other writers had to do the same thing. Why? Because first of all, it's good economically. If you look at Marvel and DC, they're endlessly doing crossovers. But also because that cross-fertilization can lead to some great ideas. It doesn't have to be mechanical and phony, as it is in one case, which I quote in the book, where I was at a Marvel crossover meeting and it was so bloody boring, I fell asleep. I actually have a really lousy childhood memory. I can't remember a damn thing. So a very good friend of mine has sent me dinky toys of the buses that I used to go to school on. So I actually have one of those as my most treasured possession. And I have that on my desk so I can look at it and it actually reminds me of my childhood, because otherwise it's a complete blank. It was, and it still is, fun doing 2000 AD. And if sometimes, or quite a lot of the time, I seem quite angry and quite shrill and quite ranting about things, it's actually because my fun is being curtailed by idiots, by suits, and often, I'm afraid to say, by thargs. So it's still fun at the end of the day. With Robusters, I don't think I had any particular actors in mind for any of the characters. I think they're all kind of shards of my personality. When it comes to ABC Warriors, however, I think that is much more film-like. Joe Pineapple's, obviously, there's a lot of Clint Eastwood in him. But my favourite from that perspective would have to be Black Blood, who I think has a lot of Peter Sellers in him. That kind of Dr. Strangelove, crazy, twisted personality. So, those two. Mongrel, no, I think he's obviously got a bit of King Kong in him, I suppose. But they weren't really that anchored onto film actors, I don't think. I'd love to have seen any number of my characters end up on the big screen. Particularly now Accident Man is finally happening and will be on the big screen. But the one I suppose above all others would be Charley's War. When I say big screen, maybe what I mean is TV screen, because it came close to being a television series. So I'd love that to have happened. And Slain, of course. And I think Slain will happen at some point because there's endless interest in it as a character. So, fingers crossed. Yeah, I am well known for disliking superheroes, but a lot of that really is in the rendering of them, because often they're pretty bloody boring. I like Frank Miller's Dark Knight, even though I don't agree with his politics, because there's passion behind it. I suppose if I could ever get my hands on a superhero character and do what I liked with it, which is never going to happen, it would be Superman, because Superman, his roots, the origins of Superman, are actually based on, I think, a real-life incident where one of the creators, at least, witnessed or was involved in some kind of witnessed a crime, I think, and that's what inspired Superman, or so I'm told. So I quite like to go back to that and see what America was like in the 30s or 40s, whenever it was created. There was one strip that never made it into 2000 AD, and I really wished it had. And that's one that I talk about in the book. It's the original Judge Dredd, because it would have been an occult serial about Britain's last hanging judge. And I wrote the first episode, and then it was decided that 2000 AD shouldn't be a cult, so it got dropped. But I always felt that I should have really done something with that story. And I tried subsequently with 2000 AD, but they came out with a reason that, for not going ahead with it, which I don't really accept. I think Judge Dredd's iconic chin must have been modeled on, I don't know, someone Ascara knew, or presumably Clint Eastwood, but certainly not my own or John Wagner's. I mean, actually, we sent Carlos as a reference David Carradine from Death Race 2000. I don't know what his chin's like. It might well be the basis as well. I didn't really mind working for Games Workshop on the Redeemer, even though I knew that a lot of their 40K series is, what shall we say, heavily inspired by things like, I suppose, ABC Warriors, I suppose. Because at the same time, we can look at their material and it can inspire us in the same way. In fact, I have a series, Prose, that came out in France, which was kind of fairly inspired by Games Workshop. So, what goes around comes around. When I started Charley's War, I always wanted it to carry on, not just through World War I, but into World War II and beyond. In other words, like an awful lot of families who have, their sons go to war for different generations. So in the back of my mind, I always really would have liked to have seen a member of the Charley Bourne family, perhaps at the Falklands, and taking us right up to the present day, Afghanistan, Iraq, and so on. I wasn't able to do that. And, I still regret that. I tried to get around it in Crisis with Third World War, where I had an army deserter talking about life. I had a soldier in Northern Ireland and so on. But I think the most effective way of doing it would have been, that whole concept of a family at war carrying on through the generations and the conflicts and pressures within it. That would have made it a fantastic idea. But, the publishers we were working for were absolute cretins, as I describe in the book. So that's all you got. That's Charley, I'm afraid, and I just wish there was so much more. In the last Defoe, which deals with chapbooks, which means cheap books, which were the original comics, if you like, of the 17th century. So there are 3 publishers in there. And, of course, any resemblance between real life and fiction is entirely coincidental. Yeah, right. Okay, well, one of them I can admit to easily, and that's Gordon Small, who I think is described as Gordon Little in the comic. And because he's a smashing guy. And he said to me when I applied for a job at DC Thompson's, where I began my comic writing career, he said, I'm not sure if you're couthy enough for us, laddie. And so I have that line in the Defoe story, and the would-be writer is saying, I can be couthy, just give me a job, sir. So that was one of them. The first one is a miserable git who says nothing works and you can't try anything. I'll leave you to speculate on who that one might be. And the third one, well, if you look closely at the way he looks and then check out a couple of likely suspects on Google, and you might just see a facial resemblance. Well, I mean, my favorite creation, I guess, always has to be Charley's War. I mean, Charley's War, because it's really saying something, and it has made a difference to a lot of people's lives, probably more than any other series. In terms of what other characters, by other writers, God, there's so many. I mean, I love Alan Moore's Watchmen, John Wagner's Walter the Wobot. I mean, I think he's absolutely fantastic, and I'm sorry he's disappeared from the series. Requiem versus Judge Death. That's an interesting one. Who would win? My feeling is that Requiem, he's probably got an element of humanity about him. So I think that would work against him. Whereas Claudia Vampire Knight, I think she'd knock the shit out of Judge Death. So what's next for the Millsverse? I think probably, in fact, definitely, Volume 2 of in the Read 'em and Weep series, which is Goodnight John Boy. I think that's the next one. And maybe another non-fiction book on some aspect of comics, perhaps martial law or Charley's War. Let's see how this one goes. The exciting thing about the Millsverse is that I can write stories and narrate stories. So it gives us a lot of creative freedom. So we have Volume 2 of Goodnight, which is called Goodnight John Boy, in the Read 'em and Weep series. But I also think there's a hell of a lot of potential in audiobooks. So I think we'll be doing an audiobook version of Serial Killer. I think that will be on the horizon shortly. And I think there's other possibilities as well. So quite excited to pursue those. I've absolutely loved narrating Be Pure, Be Vigilant, Behave, The Secret History of 2000 AD and Judge Dredd. It's been a blast. And but I have to say, after 3 days, my God, I mean, I'm known as a chatterbox, but I think I'm going to be pretty silent for the next couple of days after it. I'm Pat Mills, and this is The Secret History of 2000 AD and Judge Dredd, and much more besides. Be pure, be vigilant, behave.